Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to our midday keynote for Library 2.015. Dr. Norman Jacknis is here by the skin of his teeth. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So glad you made it.
Okay, thank you. And let me just see if I can get into the...
You don't need to do anything yet. We've got a couple things we're going to do first. Thanks to San Jose State University School of Information as the founding partner sponsor of the conference, CISL, Blackboard Collaborate, Wilma, and of course the Learning Revolution. This is a great event. We're in our 5th year. Just a delight to see the activity level and the fun happening today. Those of you who are participating live, you can look to the left of the map now for the star icon. You're going to click on that icon twice, and then you can click on the map. It's fun if you put a note in the chat as well, letting us know from where you're participating. Okay, looks like South Africa, looks like China, lots of the Americas, Panama, Puerto Rico, New Zealand. Nice. Okay, well, this is a good group. I'm going to move forward, but please feel free to keep putting your locations in the chat. Dr. Norman Jacknis is currently Senior Fellow at the Intelligent Community Forum. His responsibilities include leading ICF's Rural Imperative, building on the ideas he developed for the U.S. Conference of Mayors on a future-oriented economic growth strategy for cities. Before joining ICF, he was director of Cisco's IBSG Public Sector Group, the company's open innovation and pro bono strategic advisory group, where he worked extensively with states and local governments, the National Association of Counties, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the staff responsible for the federal government's website and citizen engagement. In addition to citizen engagement, his focus was on economic growth, innovation, and the future of technology. Before Cisco, he was Technology Commissioner for Westchester County, New York, when it was one of ICF's top 7. Welcome, Dr. Jacknis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak to this conference, which is a great conference. And hopefully I'll help make it interesting, or at least provocative today. So why don't we begin? As said, I'm president of the Metropolitan New York Library Council, which is an umbrella organization for all kinds of libraries and museums, other institutions in information services in the New York metro area. And it's also sort of taken upon itself a role as an innovator in the library world. I'm also have been involved in the Aspen Institute's working group on the future of libraries, and actually I'm going to refer to that in a minute. But all this talk about the future, I have some wonderful quotes up here. I love the first one: "A good hockey player plays where the puck is. A great player plays where the puck will be." Actually, just a little tangent here. I looked at my slides fairly fast. There will be a copy available for those who want to read at their leisure. There'll be a copy available through Library 2.0. But in any event, clearly the future is not something that you sort of wait to see what happens. And really, to make major changes, particularly in institutions like libraries, you have to start planning now, because it takes time to see some of that stuff come to fruition. And that was part of what the Aspen Institute had in mind. I'm not going to actually do a summary of this report, but feel free to go to this website and find out about the Aspen Dialogue on Public Libraries and Rising to the Challenge. And although the emphasis at Aspen was on public libraries because of the involvement of the Gates Foundation, it really cuts across the board. And just one thing I will say about it is that there are really 2 assumptions underlying Aspen's work. One is libraries do not exist in isolation from the rest of the world. And in particular, there's this movement called design thinking, which has had an impact on libraries as well. But the libraries really need to think about how their patrons' lives are changing and how they can help. And secondly, as I've said, libraries need to lay that foundation for the future. They can't just be satisfied with where things are now. Not that I know all that many librarians who are satisfied that way, but those were the assumptions underlying Aspen's work. So let's talk just a little bit about how libraries are being challenged. First, this I think summarizes it. This was from a story in the Washington Post earlier this year. When Google is your librarian and Starbucks your Wi-Fi, do we still need public libraries? The answer by the author obviously was no. But the headline writer thought that this was sufficiently believable that it was worth stating this in a headline. And this is partly what we have to deal with, especially among political leaders, and Washington has a fair number of those. And you can see why. You know, is Amazon a catalog? Look at all that detail and stuff. It's not just that. I mean, Library Thing, which calls itself a social networking site, also calls itself a cataloging site and a reference librarian. iBiblio, is that library services? They say they're the public's library and digital archive. I thought a lot of you folks did that. And then there's this, right? This is effectively, reminds me of 19th century subscription libraries, right? For $120 a year, you can get access through Scribd or Amazon to a whole bunch of books. I will ask you how many, what you all think you could do if you got $120 a year per patron, but that's unfortunately not a choice that you get, is it? In any event, this is part of the picture. This is, by the way, not something that just happened yesterday or in the last couple of years. You know, and this is from 20 years ago at an IFLA conference. Chris Batt said, what are the implications of all this for the future? The answer is that while we cannot be certain about the future for our services, we can and should be developing a vision which encompasses and enriches the potential of the Internet. If we do not do that, then others will, and they will do it less well. And frankly, I think that he was right, and that's partly what's happened. So we've had this warning, but we're past warnings, aren't we? I think what I hope my message here today is, and what I hope to give you some ideas about, is that librarians shouldn't just wait and see and react to the trends that are coming forward, but instead seize these as opportunities for new kinds of leaderships to define libraries and to increase the value of libraries in society in general, in a knowledge economy. As President Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So let's push the envelope. Let's think about some things that maybe you haven't thought about, and see how we can go from there. So I'm going to tell you about 8 different trends. A lot of them have a technology flavor, but not only, and what that means in terms of new opportunities for libraries. So the first is greater participation in open government. And why libraries should lead this? Well, first of all, libraries have always offered community space, right? A lot of meetings going on in libraries, whether it's academic or public libraries or a variety of libraries. And part of the reason for that is libraries are commonly viewed as an objective, nonpartisan place, right? People feel free to talk there. But now there's an added twist. There's this big movement in government of open data and a more sophisticated evidence-based discussion of public issues. And so now the library is not just contributing its building space, but its intellectual resources to this public discussion. And you can see this happening in some places. In the Austin Public Library, they have a conversation cafe. And similarly, in the Mid-Continent, that's Kansas City area, they have their local issues project. So the library is playing this role. And you have the American Library Association and some others put together this set of library districts that are transforming their communities. These are worth watching to see what they do in the future. And here's something you probably haven't heard about. Well, this is a picture of something called Rancho Cienega Sports Complex. It's in the southern part of Los Angeles, in a sort of middle-class neighborhood. And it's the site for a major redevelopment effort by the city of Los Angeles. And the mayor decided we really should involve the residents who live there in the planning and design of this. And so how can we do this? Well, they decided to use this tool called Betaville that was developed at New York University, which allows people to envision their city and collaborate together. But where can they do this collaboration? Where can they really have discussions? Well, they have it. It was decided at the local library branch of the Los Angeles Public Library. So here's another example in which something's quite sophisticated in the public debate forum can happen in the library and only in the library. And then, of course, you know, as I said, there's this whole open government movement, and the Chattanooga Library has pushed very hard to make all this stuff available in a reasonable way. You know, a lot of the open government data that governments have been putting out there, they pat themselves on the back and they think how wonderful they are. But effectively, it's like they've bought 10,000 books and thrown them in the lobby of the library and said, okay, here, have fun. Somebody needs to organize this. Somebody needs to make it useful. This is something that librarians have known how to do for a while, so it's a natural for them to get involved with this. By the way, there is this other study that was funded by IMLS at the Center for Technology and Government. You might want to take a look at it. It's called Enabling Open Government for All, a Roadmap for Public Libraries. By the way, this too is not new, since I had a quote from President Lincoln. I think it's only natural. I should have one from President Washington as well. And what he said was, knowledge is in every country the surest basis of public happiness. And you will remember that the role of knowledge in the citizenry was an important part of the thinking of the founding fathers of the U.S. Okay, trend number 2, digitized books and other materials. This is right, the 19th century. This is the library. There were all these wonderful books and these wonderful people who made them available to you. But we have seen a worldwide effort to digitize not just written, but oral and visual materials that are on paper, oral materials that are sort of on recorded devices, not otherwise available. Every single day you hear something. I just saw something yesterday about a huge museum that was digitizing their whole collection. And it's being delivered in a variety of ways. And it's combined, of course, with many other media that are born digital now. Which is an increasing proportion of what we all have in a collection. And you actually see hybrids. I would call this a hybrid. So this is at the University of Pennsylvania. They did this pen tags project where people could actually put tags and they could find things that were beyond the standard organization of the card catalog. And so in a sense, what you have is a hybrid here, digital enhancement to print. At the Harvard Library Lab, they did all kinds of interesting things. They said, well, you know, if you have this as a virtual kind of view, you have these digital materials, now you can organize them in a variety of ways. There's not just a one way to stack them on the shelf the way they would be with physical books. But I could look at them in a variety of ways and basically create my own virtual shelves based on my interest and what I'm after. Digital Public Library of America, of course, has just added to this. Hopefully a number of you are aware of this, and there are equivalent projects around the world. And these are an attempt to pull together in one place the digital collections. Digital Public Library of America, for example, has numerous hubs that take care of their local regions and materials, and then makes it available. And it's put together so you can actually find things that you'd normally have to travel to dozens of libraries to find, but they're all put together this way. You know, which leads to an interesting question. We're used to thinking of books as containing pages between the cover. And the sellers of ebooks have maintained that sort of metaphor, right? You know, but the reality is that once you start going digital, you're really ending that hardened, circumscribed book between the covers. You can put together an infinite variety of mashups. You can decide to take a paragraph in here and a paragraph in there and actually create something that may be more useful for the people using your library than just telling them, go read all 300 pages of each of these dozen books. And that's why I sort of have this fun picture, right? Is this a model for the 21st century librarian, right? This is a picture of a DJ who actually I think is one of the most successful. I think he earns well over $1 million a year doing this, and a lot of DJs actually earn money by pulling together digital recordings of music in a different kind of way, in a different assemblage. I mean, almost in a sense making their own albums from a variety of sources. And you can do the same thing in the library by assembling, by mashing up material to create new knowledge or new ways of looking at things that your users might very much appreciate. So think about that. You know, you don't have to wear that strange mask. Trend number 3. An economy dominated by knowledge-based services and intangible products. This is one of the keys that really repositions the library. First of all, just to give you an idea of this shift, and I took this arbitrarily, but from the year 1900 to the year 2000, in the year 1900 in the U.S., 71% of the people were in the business of making food or goods. that's completely switched around now in that people are delivering services both in the private and public sector. And by the way, this is a shift that's happened everywhere in the world. And this is a great example of this. And I love this story. It's a little bit of a tangent, but it's kind of interesting. You may remember that Frank Sinatra made famous this line, "If I can make it in New York, I'll make it anywhere," basically saying New York was the only place to be. You know, I'm a New Yorker, but I realize that's not true. And in fact, this is an article from now a few years ago from the New York Times, in which I noted that the New York Stock Exchange, everybody thinks of that as the center of the world financially, but the New York Stock Exchange had in the previous 4 years lost half, actually more than half, of their market share in trading securities. And because of this connected world and digitized world that we live in, it was easy for their competitors to be anywhere. And in fact, one of their biggest competitors, had about 12% of the market share, is called the Bats Exchange, which is based in Lenexa, Kansas. Just to drive the point home, hopefully I can get this next slide. On the upper left is a picture of Wall Street area, lower Manhattan. On the lower right is downtown Lenexa, Kansas, right? So this is the kind of world we're living in and the sort of things that become available. And you've got a general growth in knowledge-based industries. This is from a study done in the UK. By the way, it's interesting that a lot of the data, it's really kind of hard to find some of this data, but I guess it's not surprising if you think about it. It wasn't until the 1930s, probably 100 years into the Industrial Revolution, before we actually had good economic measures of the industrialization. So, you know, we're sort of in the early stages of measuring the impact of our knowledge-based services, but this is an example. There's another study done in 2008 which basically pointed out that, you know, well over a majority of people have knowledge tests as part of their basic work. And so this has led to the realization that you have a need for cost-effective lifelong learning to make a living in this economy, right? And this has come out in a variety of reports everywhere from Europe across to Asia and the U.S. And so how do you do this? Well, you know, a variety of workers, they try to do this thing no matter what they're doing. And they're almost training nonstop, right? So this demand for this. And how's the demand being met? Well, you've got Coursera, which is dozens of universities putting up their courses online, you know, the famous massive open online courses. You've got edX, same kind of thing, but you can actually even get a certificate that shows that you actually learned how to do this from MIT or Harvard. You've got some of these others that are sort of not quite universities, but are also offering all kinds of courses. You have the University of Third Age, which is something that is better known in Australia and in England, but basically it's where seniors take the lifelong knowledge that they've gained and teach other seniors. And you've got a whole variety of ways. I haven't even listed all of them, but these are just some of the places where you can go to learn things, right, to keep up your knowledge. And research, even research, people thought, wow, we have to have a great university. But you know, the reality is the research, particularly at the commercializable stage, is actually available online. And here's the problem. I kind of use this example in explaining what might be the new kind of library user that we have to be aware of. So imagine a web design firm, and in a few days that firm has to make a presentation to a chemical engineering company that they want to sell their services to. And so the first thing they do is what lots of people do. They'll go online and they'll type in this search on Google, marketing for chemical engineering firms. That seems like the right kind of term, right? And you can see, what does it come back with? 43 million results. But they don't have that amount of time. Nobody lives that long to be able to read 43 million results. And as you can see, you look on this first page, there's actually nothing all that terribly relevant here. What we're suffering from with the search engines, with the massive amount of information, of stuff on the internet, is too much information, but too little knowledge, right? And that's the opportunity. Because libraries have historically helped people find relevant knowledge. And they can do it now and really save people who feel that they're drowning in too much information or the wrong information without getting what they need. For that reason, I think libraries are the obvious central institutional knowledge economy. And libraries actually can organize a lot of the stuff that's online and package it in particular ways based on the different kinds of requests they might get from the users. And even larger, there are a lot of people now who are freelancers, entrepreneurs, adult learners, and various other kinds of roles where they don't have access to big corporate resources. The library can be that corporate librarian for those people and help them with their learning needs. Trend number 4. So we're talking about this knowledge economy, and the key competitive edge, if you will, and this is innovation. And innovation, though, is a collaborative act. You know, we think of the lone genius sitting on the hill, but the reality is, from a variety of studies, that's not how it happens. Ed Catmull, who's a very creative fellow and run this creativity machine called Pixar and now Disney Animation Studios, said creativity is not a solitary endeavor. And even Albert Einstein, in his own humorous way, said the secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your sources. And clearly we think of Einstein as being that lone genius, right? Well, not true. He was part of a larger trend of thinking. The cartoon from the New Yorker, I guess, also is an even more jaundiced way of looking at it. I get my best ideas in airport, peeking at other people's laptops. Didn't work for me today. Anyway, and Stephen Johnson wrote this wonderful book a couple of years ago called Where Good Ideas Come From. And he talked about how the origin of the modern scientific revolution was really in coffee houses in London, and they became hubs of innovation. But these days, the coffee houses are a little bit different. People are no longer meeting in the same coffee house. But they still have a need for some face-to-face meetings in a space that encourages innovation. And that's where the library can come in. This is the entrepreneurial innovation space that was set up on what had been an empty 4th floor of the main library in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which has been quite successful as a leader. And the head librarian actually was, I guess, the Library Journal Librarian of the Year before last. The fellow you see standing up there actually now is no longer in Chattanooga. He's now our new executive director at Metro, Nate Hill. But this has been enormously successful in terms of using the library and helping people imagine the library as their creative space. But there's more to it than that. You have people, even in New York, using library space for offices and to talk to each other. By the way, don't forget about senior citizens. I know everybody thinks when you talk about innovation that these are all young people, but that's not really the reality. And there's this book that came out a couple of years ago about the 2 different kinds of artistic creativity. As Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote about this in The Yorker, said, why do we equate genius with precocity? And in fact, there are 2 kinds of creativity. The most common, and in some respects the most cost-effective from an economic point of view, is experimental or experiential. And that's the kind of thing that you can do only based on a lifetime of diverse experience and experimentation. That's something that seniors have, but if they are kept out of the flow of new ideas, then they cannot achieve their potential of creativity. So that's, again, where the libraries can come in and keep them in that flow of new ideas. So, why libraries should lead? Well, libraries do bring together a whole variety of people, and that's what encourages innovative collaboration. Not the same kinds of experts talking to each other, but different kinds of people who can bring their minds to bear on an issue. And obviously it has the intellectual resources. And this is a quote, another quote I have, going back for Norman Cousins, who was an editor of the Saturday Review of Literature. I guess this is more than 50 years ago. A library should be the delivery room for the birth of ideas. I hope you take that as your motto in terms of responding to this trend. Trend number 5, billions of people both produce and consume content. Now, a lot of us, grew up in the television age where it was very much one-dimensional, and a lot of people who produce content for big companies would like it to be that way. But it's really changed. Now this concept of the prosumer, the person who's both producer and consumer, you see it with social media, with blogging, with all kinds of ways that people are creating content. People can now, make your own books, right? The whole idea of self-publishing has really taken off, and you've seen this now. This is from one study that the big 5 traditional publishers only account for 16% of the ebooks on Amazon's bestseller lists. So libraries have a role in this, or an obvious role for this, and some of them have already been partners with self-publishing services. There are some who've been working with Selfie. There are others who are working with other vendors. Provincetown Public Library in Massachusetts, off, I guess, the end of Cape Cod, has even offered itself as a platform, its own platform for self-published authors. They don't actually need to take it anywhere else. And Topeka has even gone beyond this and said, you know, remember we talked about innovation before being collaborative act. Why don't we collaboratively write a story about our community? And they've done some interesting work on this. It's not just text, by the way, it's other forms of creativity. So everybody has seen 3D printing, right? These cute little toys that you've seen people do. But of course, it's more than toys. And just to give you an example, General Electric, which makes a lot of the engines in jets, has gotten approval to use the first 3D printed part to fly in a commercial jet. So it's not just toys. In fact, this was even done here. This was a part done for a surgeon who was replacing the lower jaw of an 80-year-old woman to do a precise match. Small towns have been doing this. In small town New York, this is the Phillips Community Library. I love this story, and I love what the librarian has said about this. And I'll read this for you. The library is a place for idea sharing, from a small town library to an informational and experimental hub, an interactive and creative space. We can provide the tools for inspiration of invention and the betterment of people's livelihoods. Makerspaces are extremely beneficial to small and rural communities, as well as larger ones. And that's very true. And in fact, in the state of Iowa, they picked up on this and created a network of makerspaces in their libraries around the state, which is obviously very rural. And it's, by the way, it's not just 3D printing. So it's a variety of things, digital arts and music. And so you see things like the Melrose Center at the Orange County Library in Florida. And then there's the Aarhus Library, which is, I guess, the second largest city in Denmark, and has been really one of the world leaders in innovation. And they do all kinds of fun stuff. So there's this clapping screen, right, that involves users, and it doesn't require an awful lot of creativity, but it gets people to start thinking about, you know, some stuff that they could be doing that is a little bit more innovative. They even have this interactive floor, and basically what you're doing here is having people work together on a collaborative community art, right? Okay, trend number 6. High-quality visual conversations dramatically enhance the impact of the net. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about really visual, nonverbal communications. And you know, you've seen some of the studies that have been done that well over a majority of the communications that we have with one another is actually not the words we say, but all the other aspects of communication, and particularly when we can see each other. And so we have this saying, all of you probably heard this, seeing is believing, right? This is very important as we go forward. And you've obviously seen an increase, or if you've been in corporate offices, now a majority of corporations have some form of video conferencing, whether it's like Cisco's telepresence in the upper left, or this other version in the lower right. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that the illusion is there that the people are in the room because part of the plant's in front and part of the plant is behind the screen, right? So this really gives you a sense of being immersed together even though you're really not all there. And this is also taken into homes and on the roads, everything from the grandparents having Skype sessions with the grandkids, to Google Hangouts and FaceTime, the whole variety of these. I can't even list all of them. And this has allowed some libraries at least to extend their library through video as well, in terms of everything from literacy training, public health, becoming even little city halls for people who can't afford to go all the way downtown to the real big city hall. You even have this kind of thing, right? The holographic-like telepresence. So on the upper left there is the group Black Eyed Peas. This happens from a big event they were doing in France where only 2 of the 4 actually could be there. And so instead it was done this way. Now you've probably heard about entertainers using this kind of capability, but it's not just them. It's really happening elsewhere. So in the lower right, this was a medical conference in Minneapolis that had a presentation by a physician from New York. And he couldn't be there, so he delivered himself through this holographic-like telepresence, and not only himself, but was also able to show in 3D what he was talking about. So I think you need to understand we are only in the early stages of the Internet's development. Certainly not today. We don't use the visual aspect enough. We're way too much focused on text. But by 2030, we will be able to have high-quality visual communications collaboration everywhere, right? this is really going to extend what we're talking about. Or to sort of give you a sense as to where we are now, the way I like to compare it is our digital world is about where the telephone system was in 1920 compared to where we are today. So we have a lot more that's going to be happening yet. One of the implications of this is the library itself is no longer just local. As Maureen Sullivan, past president of the American Library Association and one of the other active members of the Aspen work group, has said we really have a nationally networked platform, and that's how we have to think about what we're delivering to people. We're actually providing almost a portal to the whole world's library for our local users and patrons. And I think you really need to think about this, about networked librarianship. I realize what I'm talking about here, some of the things that, for example, chemical engineering, I mean, you may not know anything about that. But if we pool our resources together, while one library can't do it alone, you can imagine the impact of 70,000 plus librarians, the other 150,000 other library staff working together. So they can specialize. So you, if you want to become the expert on the chemical engineering industry, or on Topeka, Kansas, or whatever, and make yourself available in that way to everybody else. And you can share the load, if you will, because instead of everybody trying to become an expert on everything in the local library. And the Global Communications Network obviously enables this library network to occur, and it allows you economies of scale so you can offer a lot more valuable services to your local users while still being cost effective. Okay, trend number 7. The internet is everywhere, accessible in many ways. I've also heard this described as ambient technology. There are a whole variety of ways. It's augmented reality, right? You can hold up your phone with certain apps and see all kinds of Starbucks or whatever. Museums have been using this to give more detailed information about the artwork or buildings. Some of the stuff I'm sure you saw Google doing its glasses thing. There are actually other versions that are still being sold. And if you're afraid this looks too geeky, the scientists at the University of Washington have already developed a contact lens that will do the same thing. Not available yet. It works on rabbits, but getting to the FDA is a little bit different issue. But the point is, this stuff is coming. It's available in a variety of ways. Any surface can be a display screen. We're used to looking at our computer screens or even our phones or whatever, but this just doesn't have to be, right? So there are a variety of ways. Cars, on tables, you can have all sorts of fun stuff. But, video displays even can be moved. I didn't show a video here because we can't really do that with Blackboard, but this is actually from the CeBIT conference in Germany, and people can stretch and move and whatever the displays have, however they wish. It's just on a glass wall. You can buy this little device from Sears that will project on a keyboard and mouse, right? Who needs to carry this stuff with us? It's one thing, and it makes this whole illusion that you have on your table. Really, any surface can be a keyboard. The upper left is from the MIT research folks, and on the lower right is a version of this that's being developed by another company. But you can see how anything, anywhere, will be able to have this technology, and you can interact by moving your fingers. These are just 4 different ways that I've seen where this has happened. Your ears. And there are even shoes now that will help you guide your way. Obviously, this has a benefit for people who have sight impairments, but not just. And for those who have good sight, you don't need to use fingers at all, right? There are devices that will see what you're looking at and see what choices you're making. My question for you is, when this internet is everywhere in these variety of ways, not just limited to computing devices, will your library services be everywhere? I think you need to start thinking about the future library and its services no longer being constrained by the building we call a library. That library space is important, and I've given you some examples of that, but your services shouldn't be constrained just by the building's walls. Every space in your community that you serve should be have access to libraries. People should be encouraged to use no matter where they are. Trend number 8, the last one. In some respects, this is going to be the biggest challenge for you. Machine intelligence, and really what's really more to the point, machine assistance to human intelligence. So, we do have Ask a Librarian, and you can chat with reference librarians in some parts of the world. any time of day and sort of get some reference guidance. But, you know, people are really used to a lot more than that. I mean, just think about, you know, examples of machine intelligence people using every day. I mean, Siri is a good example just with speech recognition. And there are a variety of others that, you know, maybe work better than Siri. But the point is that this is being developed and improved all the time. Even personal translators. I've actually used this one. It's called Word Lens, and it will allow you to hold up your phone to a foreign language, and it will translate it for you. It actually does a pretty good job. Even going beyond that, we're beginning to see software that can go out and look at information and pull it together. This is a story. This is now commonly used piece of software that will go through financial reports and put together a news story for the business pages. And I think the Associated Press is actually using this a fair amount now. And in terms of the web, partly this is because, you know, a lot of what we see with Google and other search engines is really not a great deal of depth of understanding of what the words mean. But the semantic web, the emphasis is on semantic, on the meaning of the words, and there's been a lot of work going on in order to make machines more intelligent. And in fact, this has had a parallel in the library world. So there's linked data for libraries, which is sort of part of what's coming out of here, so that you can actually link stuff together and be more intelligent in what you're offering. And of course, there are major institutions, the British Library, New York Public Library, and so forth, major universities that are building, have little laboratories, I guess, to build some of these new applications that enhance what the library can offer through machine-assisted human intelligence, right? I think that libraries in general should deal with this. And partly, libraries have always invented ways for people to organize information for people. I mean, you know, just think of the classical Dewey Decimal System, right? Well, we now need to go beyond paper publications. We need to help people organize this information. And it's a lot more complicated. I think together, though, libraries can develop new and appropriate knowledge tools. This is part of your service as well. The library doesn't necessarily always have to be delivering its wisdom out of the mouth of a human librarian if that librarian has helped put together a system that can help the library users. I think it's important that this be done it's important that this be done particularly by libraries as nonprofit organizations interested in the public good. You already know about some of the concerns about the way that Google organizes its search results. You know, libraries wouldn't have that issue if they were the ones delivering this kind of capability, and obviously going beyond the sort of search shallowness that occurs with Google. And I think that librarians, all of them, ought to participate in some way, because first of all, I mean, you can do it. You know, librarians are not in competition with each other the way big companies are. So don't just leave it up to these big institutions like Harvard and New York Public Library and all the rest to do this work, but you should get involved as well, I hope, and bring your variety of perspectives that's something other than a big institutional perspective to this. And besides, it'd be a lot of fun. So here's a summary of 8 trends and the opportunities that they create, and then I'm hoping that you will jump on to some degree at least. Be that objective, knowledgeable place for public discussion and issue analysis. Use mashups. You take advantage of the flexibility built into the digital world that we're living in now to create new perspective for your readers. Provide that help with lifelong learning. People are crying out for help, trying to figure out where they can go that they can afford to get that help. Provide a place for innovators. Provide the platform for people to create their best creative content. Be part of that network of expert reference librarians. Make sure that your library services are everywhere and people realize that they're everywhere. And help develop those new semantically aware knowledge tools for people. This transition we're talking about, I don't want to make it sound like it's really easy. I know all these kinds of transitions can be difficult. Certainly when we went from an agrarian society to industrial society, it was wrenching. There's no reason to think it's going to be any easier now. But the outcome will be beautiful, and libraries will end up actually playing that central role in the knowledge age that they deserve to play, and I think they'll, as a result, benefit everybody else. So that's my talk. We're leaving a few minutes for questions and comments.
So if you have a question for Dr. Jacknis, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand and we'll give you the microphone. To raise your virtual hand, look for the third icon over in the participant box. It's the hand. If you raise that, we'll call on you. Marie's asking, where can we get a copy of the slides? It's really easy. Just go up to File, Save, and save the whiteboard. And it will let you save them in a PDF form.
Oh, okay.
So we had an interesting day. Well, I'm not seeing a question yet. We had an interesting day yesterday. We had Teacher Librarian Day. And Ross Todd from the program at Rutgers talked about the importance that the library has played in protecting privacy and intellectual inquiry. How does that translate into these trends?
Well, that's in terms of privacy, you know, one of the things I didn't say here, but one of the reasons why I find the role of the library as the platform for people's creative works is that the library can make available those creative works, the e-books, whatever people might put together, to their patrons with the traditional confidentiality that has existed. As you well know, certainly for public libraries and who depend on companies like Overdrive, those commercial companies are saving that information. You no longer have that guarantee of confidentiality that you used to have with your local library. So the fact that libraries actually are in the position to provide a platform for people to do their own ebooks is one way to help with that confidentiality. I also think that there's a balance here, and we need to figure out how to do that. But for example, some of the work that was done at the Harvard Library Lab requires people to share some information, not necessarily identifiable information, but share some information about their reading habits. So, for example, if you are a chemistry student, you might be interested in how the chemistry faculty learned what they learned. What was the path that they went through in terms of reading? You wouldn't necessarily tie it to any particular chemistry professor, so there is that confidentiality that's protected, but you would be able to still provide information that's helpful in a way that wouldn't have been in the past when everything was just completely locked down. So there is this balance here, but I think people trust libraries to maintain their confidentiality with that. I think they're worried about how much big private companies have about them.
Yeah, Joy,
does that answer the question?
I certainly just wanted to open the conversation because Joy makes the point that there was a story about Adobe mining personal computers for information. And I think maybe one of the stories of our age is information that we thought was being collected privately then ends up not being private. And so what is the role of the library community in sort of advocating for strong privacy protections?
Well, I think libraries should advocate more, but you know, advocacy is fine if you can offer a confidential alternative to the commercial services that people have been using. That's even better than advocacy because now people have a choice, and you can tell them you have a choice. You don't need to depend on these other services that will, in fact, try to commercialize your personal data.
Linda Dunn asks, or she says, WorldCat use by all public libraries in the U.S. would provide all users with access to information resources available anywhere in the U.S. and beyond. It would also provide academic resources to individuals who may be limited to resources that were purchased to provide public types of resources. Is there a movement for public libraries to do this cooperative access to resources?
Yes, there is. And in fact, one of the new projects we have going on at Metro New York is not just having public libraries work with each other, but work with academic libraries. You know, this gets to my point about the knowledge age. We have a lot more people who need access to deep academic knowledge these days who are not sitting in university environments. You know, and there are ways they can apply for, you know, sort of scholarly status and things like that. But the reality is they're used to getting their resources through the public library. So if there's a collaboration between the academic and public libraries, I think it'll be helpful. As I said, in an age in which that dividing line between the regular sort of citizen reader and the academic reader, that dividing line is getting fuzzier and fuzzier. Yeah, this stuff is happening. There is a project as well in New York between New York Public, Columbia University, and New York University. It's called Marley, which is an experiment to try to do this kind of thing when they would pool their resources and allow people to have access. But as I said, Metro Library Council is actually taking this a step forward and really trying to build up a much wider access. And by the way, access not just to the traditional libraries, but even the libraries that exist in places like the Museum of Modern Art, which have tremendous collections that even universities don't have, and obviously in their specialty.
So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand. That's the third icon over in the participant window. You click on that hand icon and you raise it. It feels like what's happening is that we're exposing some inherent tensions. And you talked about individual activity and collaborative activity. And one of the things that sort of feels like the library transition is bringing to light is the way in which we do both. Right? We go through individual intellectual progress that's often kind of private and can take years, and we do collaborative activity. So how do you sort of manage both of those moving forward?
I guess you just have to realize you can't be a Johnny One Note. I mean, right? You have to do both. I'm not sure that I have any great wisdom about how to manage it. It's just, you know, there are a lot of demands on librarians, right? I mean, this is just one aspect of it, and I think the library world just has to figure out, like everybody else in demanding jobs, how to be able to balance these different trends. The only thing I would say about that is the collaborative environment that's being developed, the kind of thing that Clay Shirky has been writing about, where people actually are using the internet now to collaborate much more in a sort of volunteering their time to help each other. You know, that can help provide resources to the library. I know in a lot of places the 3D printers, the maker spaces, are actually oftentimes staffed by local volunteers who are not actually paid on the library staff to do this. Now, the librarians will get involved, but a lot of the day-to-day effort and assistance to other people to help achieve their individual creative dreams is actually done by other people in the community. And I think we can see more of that. So there's a way in which these two things can interplay with each other, where you can get people to collaborate with you to help other people achieve their individual desires.
Peggy George.
Another thing I'll say is there's also people, you know, libraries always worry about my individual identity. And I don't think your library will lose its identity if you offer services and knowledge that's not physically in the building. That as long as you're being essential to the lives of your patrons, the people who use the library, I don't think that there's any threat at all. And in fact, if you don't do it, you know, by hiding your head in the sand, that's going to be tougher for you in the long run in terms of getting support. I'm sorry, you were on to another question.
No problem. Peggy George, she said, I'm curious if by bringing in entertainment groups like the Chattanooga Library example, are you able to generate income to support the library?
I think that's entrepreneurial groups. Yes, I mean you might be able to. I'm not quite certain what that they got money directly from the entrepreneurs in Chattanooga. I think, however, the library did get money from economic development because this was part of the economic development strategy of the city, and obviously this was a major space for that to happen. And I think that there's a lot of money spent on economic development in the U.S. and abroad. You know, hundreds of billions of dollars if we add it all up. If the library's got just a small piece of that to help do their part of this, that would substantially increase the amount of money they could get. So it's not necessarily charging individual people for it, but it's getting the public leaders, the public officials, to realize that there's a role for libraries in their economic development plans, and for that matter, as I mentioned in Los Angeles, for their community engagement plans, which is important to them, certainly at least at re-election time, if not before.
We still have a few minutes more for questions. You can put a question in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand and we'll give you the microphone. I think we may be done.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I hope this has been helpful and at least thought-provoking for people.
This was terrific.
I wish them an interesting conference.
Oh, wait, do we have time for one more?
I have time for one more, sure.
Jan has asked, do you feel like librarians are undervalued in the more technological jobs like taxonomists and digital information managers? How do we overcome that misperception?
I agree. And one way is to reach out. So one of the things that at the Metropolitan Library Council that we've been trying to do is to reach out to people who are in the information services and the web and stuff like that. There are a lot of people like that who are actually, if you observe what they're doing, are reinventing things librarians already learned when they were in school. They're basically trying to almost reinvent library science, and so one of the things that we're trying to do is to bring them in and say, hey, there are these people who really are good at this stuff. And you ought to start talking to them so that they can learn from you, and also vice versa. But I think that that's one way, if you can reach out and tell people, look, I see how much difficulty you have organizing information in a way that's meaningful for people. This is something that we're good at, and we can help you with. And making those connections in the community, I think, would be helpful.
Good. Thank you so much. Perfect timing. Great presentation. Good. Lots of slides, and we got them all in.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. And have a good conference, the rest of it.
Yes, really appreciate it. Thanks to Dr. Jacknis. Thanks to those of you who are attending. We'll give you a couple minutes break, and at the top of the hour, we have a whole other set of sessions. Hope you're having a very fun day. Take care.
Bye-bye.